What's up, Canada? It's Startup Canada Live, Startup Foundations. My name is Paul Stevenson. Today is June 15th, and I'm the proud co-founder and current managing partner of referralmortgages.com in our nation's capital. I love working with Startup Canada. This is why I'm taking part in these amazing chats. I think Startup Canada is an intricate part of the growing kind of entrepreneurship community in Canada. And they're known as really the kind of national rallying community and voice for Canada's entrepreneurship community. Tuan, what's going on, brother?
What's going on, everyone? My name is Tuan Nguyen, and I am the owner of Health Genie. I'm a business advisory service company for dental groups, helping with mergers and acquisitions of other clinics, and the marketing to drive in new patients. And I'm here because I've had 4 startups, and they went really, really well, but I've learned so many lessons that I know I could have avoided if I had someone like a group like Startup Canada to amass a group of supporting brilliant minds to help startups launch and just crush it in a much stronger way. So it's an honor to be here with everyone here and support an organization that's doing so many great things for Canada. And of course, yeah. What's that, dude?
No, I was going to say we're going to disrupt some dinosaurs today. That's
we are.
So for anyone tuning in for the first time, every Thursday, basically on Startup Canada Live, hosts like Tuan and myself discuss topics relevant to Canada's startup, scale up, and small businesses. So we feature guests like the 2 we have today, and we provide insights into funding, growing, and scaling your business. Startup Canada Live, obviously if you're tuning in, you know this, but it's available, it's streamed live through Periscope, Facebook, and on YouTube. And that's through our good friends over at Restream.io. And quickly, we want to give a shout out to the sponsors as well. So Startup Canada Live is brought to you by Intuit QuickBooks, and they're Canada's leading provider of business, financial, and tax management solutions. I'm assuming if you have a small business, you've definitely heard of Intuit and QuickBooks. And by Mastercard. So whether you need a card for purchases or you need payment solutions to help you better manage and track expenses, Mastercard is definitely the right solution for your small business. And last, I want to actually make a shout out. The Startup Canada Awards are coming up. So if you haven't nominated or if you want to apply, you have basically until, I think the deadline is tomorrow, Friday at 11:59 p.m. So you can apply for any one of the 17 awards in your specific region of Canada.
That is awesome. And so, of course, as Paul mentioned today's awesome topic is disrupting dinosaurs, financing for startups. And we're joined today by 2 very, very special guests, Sean Burke, CEO of Front Founder. And with over 5 years of working in corporate tax and audit, in 2013, Sean was named Chartered Accountant's most exemplary young professional. Woohoo! Yeah! And he is also on the SFU Alumni Association. He serves on the board as a member of the Whiskey Wiseman not-for-profit organization. Welcome, Sean. And of course, we have, dude, can't wait to dive into what you have to share with us today. And our second guest here is Subhash Sharma. Well, Subhash is a principal at Bronte Bay CPA Professional Corporation in Toronto. And as an entrepreneur, business advisor, coach, and mentor, Subhash is a director of knowledge of all things business financing. So welcome you both, and thank you for joining us today. Let's rock.
So for anyone tuning in, if you have questions, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So if you're tuning in on like we said, Periscope, Facebook, or YouTube, just use the hashtag #StartupLive, and we'll be able to actually read out your questions on air for either of our 2 guests. So I'm going to jump right into it. I got a question for the both of you. So we're talking about disrupting the dinosaurs and talking about financing for startups. So what are the different avenues that entrepreneurs can go about to finance their startup? And how have online platforms changed that community across Canada?
Yeah, so I'll start with that one. I think there's tons of different options when it comes to raising funding. Your most obvious ones are equity and debt. The difference between the two is equity, you're actually becoming an owner. So you're investing into the company, and in exchange for that money you're giving the company, you're actually becoming an owner and you own a piece of that company. Whereas debt is something more traditional, like a bank. When a bank wants to give you money and extend that line of credit, you basically have the obligation to return that principal, being the amount that the bank invested or the bank loaned to you, with interest on top of that loan. So debt and equity, there's definitely different benefits and drawbacks to each, but those are your 2 primary methods of gaining capital. The other thing, too, is Canada has a great ecosystem when it comes to government funding and different grants that are available. So depending on the sector that your company is operating in, There's lots of different government grants that are available, and really it's just up to you to kind of try to find where and what those are. The other thing that maybe I'd mention too is just obviously a little bias when it comes to online funding platforms. At Front Funder here, we're essentially an online funding and investment platform that's connecting earlier stage companies with any Canadians across Canada that want to invest in your company. So again, being biased, I think, in terms of where we're headed to, being the digital online era, I think, today is a great testament. 4 of us all across Canada being able to speak and share our experiences through the podcast here. But one of the things is that the accessibility and the efficiency behind online platforms is really just changing the game. So I think it's still important that, online funding platforms are able to connect people, and you still have to have that personal relationship. But at the end of the day, it really facilitates and makes it much more efficient process.
Very awesome. So, Subhash, in response to this question, I want to ask the same question, but maybe a slightly different version of it, which is on the client side, or the one who requests the funding, are there certain do's and don'ts that they should be aware of in terms of financial infrastructure so that they can apply for these funds? Or should they just go for it right away? Or, you know what I mean? Like, some people have no idea what numbers are supposed to be before they ask for money.
Well, as a professional accountant, we belong to the Dinosaur group. So we believe in conservatism. The Swashosaurus. So we believe in conservatism. Like in today's day and age, with the technology and with the cloud infrastructure and with the freeware available, there's so many resources these days compared to even 5 or 10 years when you had to put up your own servers and build infrastructure from scratch. So now is the time when you should be cutting down on the startup costs, and it is possible. Like these days, it's so easy to be an entrepreneur. So I don't want to say the word cheap, but very cost effective to be an entrepreneur compared to even 10 years ago, for example. So leverage what is out there. A lot of freeware out there. A lot of very reasonably priced tools out there. So one should start from there.
Sorry, to Sean's point, to just kind of reiterating what you're saying, there are grants and things like that you can use.
Yes, yeah. So
to help offset the cost.
Just getting to that. So start with minimizing your cost to start with, and because the resources are always going to be limited, no matter how much money you have, they are always going to be limited. And the money doesn't come very cheap. So whether it's debt or whether it's equity, debt I believe is cheaper than equity because in the long run, because you pay a certain amount of interest and that's what you pay versus paying an investor in the. On the other hand, equity has its own value because you cannot raise debt unless you have some equity behind you. So equity can be your own equity. It could be friends and family money, love money, whatever you call it. And then comes the grants and the subsidies, because grants are possible only when you have some prototype or some business plan, financial projections already lined up. So in the initial phase where most of our entrepreneur friends are, I think it's very important to have some kind of your own money or family money to get started. And that's what I see on daily basis here. A lot of my clients, I do help a few startups in the IT space, and most of them think that it's very easy, you just go out and get funded. Funding takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy, and most people get stuck in that because with the changes in the marketplace, with the evolution happening out there, by the time you develop your idea and get funded, the world has already gone very far, right? So you're already left behind. So you must start with some kind of capital of your own so that you bring the prototype or the product or service up to some stage where you can actually demonstrate it, where you can demonstrate the value to the customer or to the user, and that is where you go for the funding, either loan or equity. So that's my
what about service-based organizations? How do they go about to gaining funding? There's no R&D tax credits. There's none of that happening. So how would you advise someone who just needs extra money to start up a consulting firm?
Well, there are grants and subsidies even for service-oriented business, as long as you can show a process which is different or which is unique or which is improvement on the existing stuff. Even, for example, accounting, if you can create something brand new or something different which is cheaper and better, I think the grants can be there. So it's not saying no to it. So service business also, like even though it's more difficult compared to products which you can see and feel and touch, service also there is possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point, is that a lot of people, especially with products or apps or things like that, by the time you actually get to the point where you have a proven track record and you get funding, your idea might be dinosaur too, right? Like it might be prehistoric at that point because you're 8 months down the road because things just move so fast.
And I have actually seen that happen. Like people come with this bright idea, and by the time they get to the market, they're already very late in the process.
We often teach people too in our business, especially about good debt and bad debt. And the simple way that we explain it is that good debt is something that you're taking on debt that appreciates, and bad debt is when you're taking on debt to buy something that depreciates. So you have to be confident if you're taking on that debt that your business is going to appreciate, so that you're actually benefiting from that debt, and as you said, earning equity or gaining equity in your business. So on that same point, I'm going to stick with you, Sebastian, for this next question. What do you think is the most risky way for people to finance their startup? Like, what are some things that people should avoid, aside from the bank of mom and dad?
Well, the worst thing which can happen to a business, a startup, is to be funded very, very quickly, like very, very easily, and a lot of money. Like if you can raise $1 million, your idea is bright and brilliant, and you can raise $1 million. That actually is not a very good thing in the startup space, because most entrepreneurs don't have the experience of the market, and they blow it very, very quickly. And they're like their idea of running a business is, okay, how can we use this money and go to the next level? However, if on the other hand, if you have less money or less funds available, you try your best to be lean and be efficient and find technologies or find things which can be done free or very reasonable cost. So that gives you actually more depth or more experience into the idea versus having been funded very, very quickly. So success looks like very easy in that case, but most startups actually die when they're funded very quickly. That's my take on this.
So Sean, your business out in Vancouver, we were just saying, we have Canada covered. I know we have Toronto, Ottawa, and Vancouver here. So out in Vancouver, do you work by yourself, or do you have a team there as well?
No, so Front Funder, we're actually a national platform. So we operate across Canada. We have 14 full-time employees, both bilingual, French and English. We have Montreal office as well. So for us, it's really about being able to reach out to a much broader pool of potential investors. Right. So traditionally, when you have those meetings with a traditional kind of angel investor, that's going to be done face-to-face. What we're trying to do is basically expand that and say, earlier stage companies, you don't have to be reliant solely on one type of investor, and that being a high net worth individual. For us, what we want to do is we actually want to broaden that pool. So you can reach out to, your friends, your family, your friends of friends, and those people can invest $1,000, $500 at a time. And in aggregate, you're actually going to get certain benefits from those, what we call retail investors. And that's going to be, those are your brand champions. Those are the people that are out there helping you to grow your business and are your loudest voices. They're the ones who are your best salespeople. And you can get those investors in addition to your angel investors who will bring that kind of network experience and other kind of management support that they would traditionally offer.
So the process.
By the way, I had a quick look at the Front Funder website, and it really sounds like a very good idea. So you're in the right time at the right place.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, guys.
In terms of a process, traditional versus the online route, is the online route just more options, but the kind of like the process is very similar, length of time and what's required? It's not like a quick way to get money, right? Or it can be a quicker way to get money.
No, I think you're exactly right. It's definitely an additional way to get funded. And so what we try to say is, don't expect just to basically put your funding campaign up on Front Funder and get funded within a couple of days. Mm-hmm. That's not realistic. And we are what's considered an exempt market dealer. And what that means is that we have to do due diligence on every company that comes through our platform. So for us, it's a highly vetted marketplace where anybody can look at investing in these companies, but there is an investment review that's performed on every company. And through that due diligence process, there's 5 different people that also review the company and are going through that due diligence phase to ensure the integrity of the system, so that when people are investing, there's a higher level of confidence when they're actually making their investment.
So what is that due diligence that we should be aware of that way perhaps increases our chances of getting the funding?
Yeah, so I mean, it would really, we look at it no differently than a traditional VC or, angel investor would look at it. First of all, we want to understand, what is the product, what is the market potential, who are the people behind the company? Has there been experience that's relative to them going out and actually having that success and executing their business model? We also want to look at, what from a product market fit, if there is traction, what does that traction look like? And those are just some of the higher level kind of concepts that we'd be looking at. We talked a little bit about debt and equity, so we want to understand your cap table, your valuation, and what that funding sort of looks like in addition. Because if you're an investor and you know that the company you're potentially investing in has a significant amount of debt that is going to become due and repayable in the next 5 months, well, all that funding that you're potentially investing is going to be going to repaying that loan. So we want to have a good understanding of, what is it that the use of these proceeds are going to go out and accomplish. And if you are able to accomplish those goals, then what's the next layer of valuation that you're going to be raising at to make sure that, you're not raising currently at a higher round than you otherwise would set you up for failure in the future.
So I find that having worked with several of my colleagues in the startup space, the expense side of the application is not too bad, but where I find many of the challenges determining that market potential. Do you have any tips for, let's say, a technology company? I think just the majority of people, in terms of how can they measure what that market potential can be? Like, where should they go, or what are processes, or how can they research this?
That's a tough one. I think the reason why that's a tough one is because every market is very different. So I think the first thing that a company really needs to understand is their customer and who that customer is, and what the lifetime value of that customer could potentially be worth. So to back it up and to specifically answer your question, there's a definite thing that we see quite often, actually, which I would highly recommend not to do. And that is basically to say, okay, we know that the market of this overall industry is worth $1 billion. And if we as a company can go out there and just get 1% of that market share, well, that's going to be a very large number. So from that perspective, everybody kind of can come with that answer. So what we would say is, okay, well, sure, that's a great, possibility. But at the end of the day, how are you going to go and get that 1%? Or, what's the strategy around acquiring those different customers, and how much is that going to cost relative to that lifetime value of your customer? So that's more of the approach that we would take. And that's also something that we work with. Each company that is onboarded on our platform, they get a campaign manager. So those are some certain analytics that we would work with them to be able to communicate, so that a sophisticated investor comes across and you have your I's dotted and your T's crossed.
That was gold, eh? Oh my goodness, that was gold.
I want to add a few. I want to add a few lines here.
Wow. Thank you for that, by the way. I think that's a lot of people do say that if we get a percentage of this massive market demand, it's we're gold. But at the end of the day, who are you serving, and then really figure out how to provide the lifetime value. I think that's exactly how people calculate market potential. Very brilliant. Thank you.
I just want to add a few things here. Like, one of the main things, like especially in the technology tech space, like most people are very, very focused on their valuation. Okay, at some point the valuation will be 10 times or 100 times, and Google will come or somebody will come and buy them out. So that is primarily the focus for most companies. But really successful companies, like, they actually focus on the cash flow. They're okay, when I'm going to get my first paying customer. So that, I think, in the long run, is same traditional business like any other business. So if you focus on the cash flow as well as capital valuation, I think that's a better way to go.
Yes, absolutely. Cash flow, I think. In fact, my experience of selling companies, I've sold 2 of my 4, and cash flow was probably half of the focus of the business valuator.
Mm-hmm. That actually works.
Yeah, and I was surprised, actually, the first one, when they asked me about my cash flow statement and dove into it. Shred was the other thing that really helped us, but the cash flow statement was huge. And I don't think many entrepreneurs realize that until they ask for money as well as they're looking to sell their company.
Right. And a lot of people confuse the cash flow with the income statement. So that's not, it is similar but not the same. So you have to actually focus on the cash, especially.
So can you provide some of some of the greatest failures, epic fails you've seen in applications, and maybe relating to cash flow or anything else for that matter?
Well, I know one, I don't remember the name, but I do remember a case in Vancouver. So this was not in the IT space, but these were clinics. So they were actually opening medical clinics. Maybe Sean can help me with the name. So they were opening medical clinics, like doctor family clinics, at a very, very fast pace. And at one point, they collapsed, the whole house collapsed, because when you're opening a clinic, so you sign up a lease, you deposit 3 months, 6 months kind of rent, and the cash starts after about a year's time, when the cash actually starts to come in. But more cash going out and less cash coming is a big killer in many businesses. IT space, you don't hear these stories much because they don't even come to that point. Especially in the startup space, they don't come to that point where they actually can show themselves. But in real world,
I feel like the medical clinics in Vancouver per capita are probably a lot higher than anywhere else in the country.
That is right, yeah. But these guys were very successful. I don't remember
medicinal clinics? Is that what you guys are trying to go to in Vancouver right now?
No, these were real family clinics.
Okay. We have those kinds of clinics being shut down in Ottawa all the time. So,
just to add one point to that, because I agree, cash is king. I mean, you hear that kind of phrase quite often, but at the end of the day, when you're raising capital, the biggest thing that I would recommend is, what are you using that capital for, and how is that going to help you achieve those milestones that are going to get you to that next round? So when you're able to kind of to project out, if I raise $1 million today, well, that's going to allow me to spend roughly, about $100K per month in burn rate for the next year. So I think from that standpoint, being able to understand what that use of proceeds is going to get you and how that's going to help you achieve your milestones, that's the most important thing to help you get to that next level of either profitability or your next raising round.
Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I was just saying, what percentage of new entrepreneurs kind of go into the crowdfunding stage thinking that their product is just going to carry them, right? At the end of the day, anyone that's going to invest in a business, it's a numbers game. They want to see the numbers, they want to see the projections. That's, as we said, whether it's cash flow or whether it's the industry marketability. But what percentage of people come in thinking that they just have the best product and kind of disregard the numbers side of it?
I've never seen an entrepreneur think that their product wasn't the best and the greatest, and if it is, probably don't want to invest in them. So, from that standpoint, I think it's really about just doing a quick reality check and, having those honest conversations with, your advisors, with your people who are able to actually kind of give you that reality check that you might need to say, okay, well, yeah, sure, your product's great. There's lots of room for improvement. But at the end of the day, investors are looking for a return on their investment. So you got to be able to communicate clearly and effectively what is that exit strategy and how are those investors going to be able to get a return on your investment with an expected period of time, or what is the expected period of time. So, the product might be great, but you got to be able to communicate what that exit strategy is, and that's going to help you in your financing round for sure.
So how important is it for you to have a mentor then when you're going through that financing stage?
Oh, huge. Maybe, if it's Tuan's fourth company at that point, he probably is an expert himself. But even still, Tuan, you'd probably say the same thing. It's good to get a second opinion. It's good to kind of get that support, as well as too is just different introductions, because anytime you go out to raise capital, the more introductions that you can get, the more networking that you can leverage, that's going to help build confidence, because people at earlier stage investors, they're investing in the team and the people's ability to execute. So having those advisors, those people who have been there before, can help you kind of navigate those waters that you don't really want to go into. So important. So whether it's a funding portal like us or if it's, advisors, definitely would recommend that for sure.
That's awesome. And yes, to just affirm that I help dental groups with M&A right now. So we go to business evaluators who don't focus in the dental space because they see different things than people who've been doing valuations for dental practice for 20, 30 years now, right? So it's worth it to pay that extra $1,500 for an outside, industry business valuator just to see what else they see. All right. Now, I want to kind of go back to same topic still, but on the liability side in terms of cash flow. Do you look at things like, the type of lease they signed and employee contracts if they have any? Is that part of the risk evaluation that you look at when you're considering funding?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, when you come back to an overall cash flow analysis, you want to look at what are the material contracts. So to the extent that, you have a super capital intensive project where, you need a specific license or building permit to be able to operate, well, that's critical to the business and the business's ability to succeed. So as an investor, you need to be aware that, okay, if we lose that license or if we can't afford the rent and we're all of a sudden kicked out, well, now we effectively have no business. So from a liability standpoint and a due diligence, that is definitely something we at Front Funder would take into account on each individual company's due diligence. And, I think, you could, Subhash, probably say the same thing when it comes to, even evaluating a company, that's probably going to be taken into consideration as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we normally go by 2 or 3 years projections, and that's the reason that you want to be factoring a lot of different things, a lot of different scenarios, the slow periods, the good periods. Most people focus on the good periods and they think that it will carry them through. But a lot of companies get killed in the bad periods, like when recession happens, for example, and that can last 2 or 3 years. And no matter how good technology you have, the companies go down. Even the biggest ones have gone down, including GMs. And so nobody is exempt from that recession. So when the recession hits, it hits everybody. So companies who have some kind of sustained cash flow or projections to handle that kind of situation. It could be line of credit, it could be debt, it could be equity or resources for equity or debt. Like everything can carry you through those periods. So you have to plan for those things.
So Subhash, I have a question for you as far as recently there was the hike in minimum wage here. And I'm wondering how you're advising your clients, I guess, that you kind of coach or mentor. How are you advising them on what to do with existing employees for small and medium businesses that are also going to have to kind of scale their employees' wages that may have, 5 to 10 years tenure at the business?
Mm-hmm. Well, these are real issues. So everybody has these challenges, and it does mitigate over time. But the entrepreneurs have to be ready to take some hit in the beginning. So when if the government comes, so these are the risks from the government regulations. So and they can happen to any industry. Now this is across the board. So if the wages go up, they go up for every industry, right? So it affects everybody, including your competitors. So it's not like they're not picking you up for that. So people go in different directions by having contract arrangements and things like that. But then there are CRA regulations to worry about and things like that. So yeah, you have to be ready for the things which are coming. I mean,
I feel like
suddenly. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I feel like for startups, Sean was talking about that earlier. Like, there's so many platforms and tools and stuff that you can use now that I feel like it's almost going to hurt the overall job market because people are going to say, well, why wouldn't we just automate this, or why wouldn't we just automate the business instead of hiring someone, right? So I think it's going to be very counterproductive.
Which is happening in any case. So you cannot stop that from happening, like robotics and these things are going to change the landscape in any case. But still there are certain things which are done by human hand and they will still be done by human hands and brains, even with all the automation. So automation will create different kind of jobs, newer jobs. People have to be ready to move on and learn different kind of stuff. Besides that point, when you jump from $12 suddenly to $15, so there's going to be some hurt along the way, but then businesses have to get used to that reality, right? So when it happens.
Absolutely. So I guess, Tuan, if you have any questions on the type of your time.
Yeah, I have one just on presenting, like pitching actually. So when someone goes through the online portal funding route, do they eventually have to do a presentation? Like, is this a great way to avoid those, business owners who don't like public speaking to avoid having to do the pitch, or what do you recommend? Like,
yeah, I think it's for sure. I mean, And just going back to kind of what Sebastian was just saying, like, you will never replace the human element behind, making a pitch. So regardless of whether or not you can kind of hide behind the camera a little bit, do your retakes, get that exact angle, you got the lighting looking good, all that kind of stuff, that's important. There we go. I see it. I see Paul. That's super important because that human connection, again, goes back to the investor needs to be able to have that confidence that you're going to go out there with your team and lead your team to execute on basically your next milestones. So we encourage companies to kind of put together that, sexy video that maybe is attractive to, all the different retail investors across Canada, Paul again. But from that standpoint, that's just the teaser. That's to, open the conversation. From there, if it is a accredited investor or a high net worth individual who's looking to put in quite a large amount, well, you're going to have to be able to communicate why your team is the right team and you have the right product to succeed. So unfortunately, it's the starting point. It's the one-stop shop, the central hub that basically you can refer all of your different potential investors to. And from there, it's really a place where you can manage those conversations that you are having and take them seamlessly through their investor experience.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Thank you by the way. Paul, do you want to take on the Twitter question here? I think we got a Twitter question that came in.
Yeah, we have I was going to say listener, but I guess a watcher. Someone watching us. So the Twitter question is, what apps should every finance manager know about? Sorry, let me start over. What app should every finance manager know about that would make their lives easier today?
Oh man, that's a good one. Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I'm obviously biased with Front Funder being, we have a web marketplace essentially that can help you kind of manage those investors, but that's probably not the answer everyone's looking for. That's a good one. Sebastian, do you have any kind of...
I think that's a great answer. where can they find that? Like, where is that located on your site if you want to direct people there to take a look at that?
Well, what I would like to say is that, apps are great and they are evolving all the time. So QuickBooks Online itself is a nice platform to be on when you're a startup. It's very, very important, especially in the startup stage, to be financially in control over the situation versus leaving it till the last that, okay, someday we'll do it. So because when you do the projections and after 1 year, the investor want to see the actual result and how do they match. And if you don't have that close match, then you're losing your credibility, right? So it's very, very important to have your finances in order. QuickBooks Online, very, very simple tool, very reasonably priced tool. And also your sponsor at this point, I think. So that's one tool. Yeah, but other than that, sorry for not interrupting. So other than that, it is basically the financial knowledge. Like no matter what tool you use, unless you are either financially savvy or you have somebody on the team or you have professional advisors, the apps do not do a good job themselves. Like no matter which software you use, it is basically the human element behind that software which will actually produce better results.
And the thing is too that every single situation is so complex, right? Depending on the industry and everything else. So I mean, you can have a generic app that might kind of direct you in the right, or kind of send you in the right direction, but they're not going to give you the same response that as you said, an expert or the experience. So that actually is a perfect segue. So one of the main questions I had that I wanted to ask you guys is what can you tell entrepreneurs that they would only learn through experience, and how would you advise them to ask the right questions? Like, what are some of the questions that they should ask up front?
The first and foremost thing I would say is start early. It's never too early to start making introductions and building the relationships with your potential investors. One of the probably biggest pitfalls when it comes to financing and raising that capital is not having a list large enough, because I would say, probably 95% of the time that you reach out to investors, you're going to get a no. And sometimes it's probably going to take a lot longer for that investor to tell you no, when in reality, you sort of wish they'd just tell you up front so you stop wasting all that time pursuing and chasing them. So what I would say is start early, build those relationships. You're not necessarily looking for the financing on day one. And if you are, you're probably in a tough position and you're probably never going to get that financing. So when you go out there, be genuine. Right? Build that personal connection and relationship with those larger investors and start early in building that list. A good place to kind of start with that, and I think this kind of maybe will answer a little bit more of the Twitter question that came in. But, good places, yes, Front Funder, we have a list of potential investors and we're growing that list, but, other platforms that already exist out there, AngelList, great place for you to go and to do research to see what type of investors have invested in other companies that are similar to your industry or vertical that you operate in. Crunchbase is another great platform. Then there's also PitchBook, which is a little bit more expensive. But there's lots of different tools and apps out there that can help you provide that kind of lead list that you can sort of start building. But build it early and never stop engaging those investors. Even if you're raising a year from now, make sure you're giving them those continuous updates so that they know when you do go to raise, you're going to be the first person on their mind when it comes to that specific industry.
I want to agree with Sean on this one because I'm working with few investors, like entrepreneurs, and mentoring them basically. And I have been seeing them for about a year now, and they're still in the process of perfecting their business plan, perfecting their pitch. And I keep saying them, get started with something rather than waiting for a perfect kind of situation, which is not going to happen. So might as well get started with what you have, wherever you are, get started and get going. So take action. Taking action is the most important part of being an entrepreneur.
So what would you like, without obviously exposing any names or anything confidential, but what is an example of one thing you'd like to see them do that maybe someone else right now watching is feeling stuck at that exact spot?
Just taking the action. Just taking the action. A lot of people have a brilliant idea, business plan in the making, financial projections in the making, and keep talking and talking and talking. You meet them after a month and they're at more or less same point. So taking action probably is the biggest, because by the time they come up with a perfect situation, the world has already moved forward.
Yeah, just to add to that, one of the things is if you think about it and put yourself in the investor's shoes, they see hundreds of pitches a month. So what are you going to do that's different to stand out? And how are you going to be memorable? That's really important to understand, because if you go and you send them a pitch deck and, hey, I'm looking for funding, here's some cool metrics, hope you'll connect. That's not very original. So try to find that kind of niche angle that gets your foot in the door. The best, obviously, way that, most entrepreneurs are able to make introductions is through other referrals. So if you can really find a strong referral network that's going to help you make introductions to these higher net worth individuals, that's super helpful. And then obviously the other piece to that is building and understanding what the value an investor is going to bring. So not all investors are alike, and not all of them are going to be able to help you succeed. When we talk about the crowd and having that be a portion of your investor base, the crowd, like I mentioned earlier, they're your biggest brand ambassadors and they're your loudest cheerleaders. So you want to be able to empower them to have different information, different updates that they can go and share when they're at a cocktail party or hanging out with their friends and say, hey, did you check out the latest feature or product build that's up on the site, or the latest tea that's being offered in the coffee shop? So you want to empower your entrepreneurs and give them information that's going to make them useful to being on your cap table. So understanding the value and benefits of your investors is super key so that you can play to those strengths and have them help you succeed.
Right. So basically what you're kind of saying is that just because they're high net worth doesn't mean they're an investor you want to approach. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the flip side. You might have somebody who wants to come in and they're grinding you on valuation, and you legitimately think and have valid reasons for backing up why you shouldn't go any lower. And if they keep persisting you, well, maybe you need to kind of take a step back and say, is this the guy that I want at my board table when we're having our board meetings, or even different key important management discussions, and are they going to be helpful to the company? So I think that's definitely a fair statement to say. And that's up to the management team to really kind of understand the value that investor is bringing.
Sebash, I love your message about taking action. My favorite quotes are that action always beats intention, which is very true in a startup. And Tony Robbins says the path to success is to take massive, determined actions. So just get moving, just start going and figure it out as you go.
Also, don't be scared of failure, because failure is imminent. It is very, very important to be successful.
Absolutely. We have another Twitter question here, so we'll just, I'm going to fire this off. It says, for those in smaller cities or rural communities, do you need to go to larger cities to get funding? I think the short answer is not necessarily. I think really the key to understanding that is what's your value proposition that you're potentially bringing to the market, and who can help you support, or who can help support you, raise that funding. So it really depends on what types of investors you're engaging. I mean, if you're doing kind of more of a crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding round where you're doing something for the greater good of the local community, well, maybe you can get that funded in your rural community where somehow that business is going to have some sort of bigger impact on everybody overall. So it makes sense for everybody to pitch in and become part owners in that company. Whereas, if you're specifically looking for one investor and it's a very specific niche market, and that investor is in, Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary, wherever they are, well, then, yeah, you're probably going to have to get on a flight and go to one of those cities in order to really close that deal. Sebastian, no, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I don't think geography is at all important in this day and age. So, you can be anywhere in the world and still be active in business. And I have seen some very successful businesses in very small community, and sometimes it doesn't even make sense. Why would you like to live here? When you go and see this little place, and why would you live here? What is out there, and what makes you choose this particular location? But that is where they have decided to do it, and it works. It does. So the cost, from the accountant's perspective, it is basically controlling your cost, having a good idea, working very hard on it, taking very, very big action, just like Tony Robbins mentioned, don't be scared of failures. It happens, and just move on. So learn from it, move on, try again, fail 10 times and try again. Don't give up.
And I think that's where, Sean's being humble in that last answer, but that's why front founders are around, because the small communities can now access from anywhere and start the conversation early and decide if the investment of having to travel is necessary or opportunistic or not, right? So I think it's, like Subhashi said, the front founders, perfect timing, right?
It's perfect timing, yes, absolutely.
People are living in small communities, coming up with the absolute brilliant ideas. And Skip the Dishes, I'm sure you guys are familiar with those guys. They decided to stay in Saskatchewan, right? They decided to stay. They didn't want to move into the big cities, and they built it up to several hundred people, sold it for, I think, a few $100 million. I'm not too sure. But seeing his speech online about that decision kind of, opened your eyes that you could actually potentially create your business globally from even a small spot.
Yeah, for sure. Totally. So we're nearing the end of our discussion here about disrupting the dinosaurs. I feel like we've done that. Sebastian, I feel like you're coming into the new age here through these discussions. Yeah. But before we go, though, I wanted to...
I just wanted to add on Sean's thing. So, from the investor's perspective, when you see all this Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, so, you get tempted. Okay, why cannot I be a dragon? Why cannot I be a shark? Why cannot I invest? So I think you're in the perfect space where somebody can say, okay, I have this money and I'm passionate about this particular industry. So if there is an opportunity, I'm willing to invest my spare change. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And I think Canada needs it. The world needs it, but it's great that it's right here in Canada. I was talking to a friend of mine who originated from Uganda, and he came to Canada, and we were having a discussion on Friday night at a barbecue, and he was just saying, he's like, I think Canada is one of the greatest examples of success for any country in the history of mankind. Just the way that we do everything collectively, we're just one of the biggest success stories ever. So having something like this, and again, an organization like Startup Canada, where we can all kind of come together and work together and continue to build this amazing country, is just what we've done in the last 150 years is incredible. So yeah. So we're going to wrap this up, but I want to pass it over to our two guests. So if you guys, I'm going to kind of turn the stage over. If you have any closing remarks, comments, or any stories that you want our listeners to have before we go, now's the time to throw it out there.
I'll let Sean go first.
Sure. I wasn't prepared for this one, but you know what? I think the biggest takeaway is, off the top of my head, I'd say, like I said earlier, start early. It's never too late to start your funding rounds. Get help. We talked about that in terms of, reaching out to your different advisors. the one thing that we're building right now at Front Funder is we're building the How to Master Your Startup Funding Guide. It's going to be about a 14-page guidebook, and it walks through a lot of the different elements in terms of funding, the different investors, and all that kind of stuff. So what I would say is, just hit me up on Twitter, reach out to me, and I'll make sure that you get on our list. We should probably have a landing page actually for that for people to get priorities for that. But anyways, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll make sure you guys get a copy of that. And it's been a lot of fun today. So thanks a lot for hosting, guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Shabash.
So,
I've been a living example of entrepreneurship myself. I started when I was 19, and then I lived in different countries and lived in different cities, including Vancouver. And I started and closed and failed and succeeded again. So this is what entrepreneurship is about. Like you have to be really a person of steel. Like I don't want to say man of steel, but a person of steel. Like you have to be really, really tough to take a lot of no's, lot of rejections, lot of failures. And if you're strong enough, this is in it for you. Like this is something for you. And today is the perfect time. By the way, we are living in an era of abundance. Lot of capital out there, lot of money out there, lot of resources out there. When I started, there were no mentors. Like I could not go to somebody for information, for example. So today you have this Google and you have the Wikipedias and you have the mentors and Startup Canada, where you can take a lot of help, very, very reasonably priced like resources. And you can build a business like almost from scratch very, very easily today. So like we are so lucky to be living today.
I think Front Founder too is again, it came at a perfect time because there's so much. I heard a stat that 70% of Canada's wealth is in the hands of the baby boomers, right? And so when they retire, they're going to be looking for some fun investments to get into, outside of the stock market. And if they can invest in growing our country and businesses within it, I think it's an amazing idea. So thanks again to both of you, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. Be sure to join. Tuan and I are actually hosting a separate episode Tuesday, June 20th, and we're going to discuss the secrets to a high-performance startup. The guests are going to be Alyssa Furtado from Rate Hub, which I'm really excited to sit down with her because that's someone that a lot of our clients come through, and Dr. Sean Wise. He's the entrepreneurship professor at Ryerson U. And if you guys want to register for that event, you can just go to startupcan.ca/events.
It's going to be a lot of fun for sure. Seems like anyone with the name that starts with S seems to be a lot of fun on the show. Huh? Like we knew Sean Wise a while back, and he was a lot of fun as well. So good stuff. And so to all the listeners here, you can also stay informed with all the latest opportunities, announcements, entrepreneur events by following Startup Canada on Twitter, like us on Facebook, following us on Instagram, and a new hashtag Startup Podcast drops every Tuesday on iTunes. Startup Canada Live here is on Periscope, Facebook Live, event stream every Thursday, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So remember guys, the Startup Canada Awards coming up. Make sure you apply or nominate for Startup Canada Awards. Deadline is tomorrow. We want every entrepreneur to have a chance to win one of 17 awards in each of the 7 regions across Canada. So to everyone guys,
everyone be exemplary.
Be exemplary. Yes, exactly.
Let's hug it out, everybody.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
All right, guys. Peace. Great chat.
Thank you so much, everyone, guys. Have a great day.
Have an awesome day.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.